No one saw Caleb return, his silhouette blending with the dusk, his hands still raw from gripping rifles in places he couldn't aim. The war had carved him down to bone and nerve, leaving a man who flinched at fireflies. He sought only a corner to disappear into. But June, a small girl with a scar above her brow, pointed at the school bus, her arms shaking like a reed in a gale. Her eyes locked on his, begging without words. Caleb stayed. That single act cracked the earth beneath their feet. The sun hadn't fully climbed yet. Just a low, peach-colored smear across the eastern sky, brushing the tops of trees like someone hesitated before starting their day. Not for the body, but the mind. Sweat clung to the back of his gray sweatshirt, cooling fast in the early October air. Birch Lane was empty except for the distant clatter of trash cans being pulled to the curb and the occasional bark of a dog behind a chain-link fence. And then he saw her. At first, she barely registered. Just a shape. Small. Still. At the corner where the broken bench leaned, under a peeling school bus stop sign. She didn't move, didn't glance at her phone, didn't even seem to breathe. She was maybe 7, maybe 8. Pink coat, hood drawn tight. A backpack, twice the width of her shoulders, clutched her chest like body armor. She didn't look cold. She looked braced, like she was standing in front of something she couldn't run from. Caleb slowed to a stop about 20 feet away. Not out of concern, at least. That's what he would have told himself, but because something in him just pulled back. And then, a movement, her hand. It rose, slow, stiff, and pointed toward the road. A yellow school bus came into view, tires grinding softly against pavement, lights blinking like tired eyes. She didn't wave. She didn't step forward. She pointed, directly at the bus, like a soldier pointing out a landmine. Caleb's breath caught, sharp and involuntary. He didn't know why. He just stood there, sweat drying on his skin, suddenly too cold. When the bus came to a full stop, the door opened with a wheeze. The driver didn't look down, just waited. No greeting. No wave. A boy stepped out from the second row, tall, black hoodie, hands in pockets, and walked past the girl without a glance. She didn't move, and then Caleb noticed it. Her jeans were soaked, mid-thigh down, not from rain, from something else. Something shameful and human. She wasn't crying. That would have been easier to witness. No, she stood curled slightly inward, as if trying to fold into herself. As if she wanted to disappear, but didn't know how. Caleb had seen that posture before. Afghanistan. His second tour. A boy no older than 12, standing outside the wreckage of a house that wasn't his anymore. His family's blood still warm on the walls. The same stiffness in the spine. The same white-knuckled grip on something, anything that hadn't been taken. And it hit Caleb then, harder than he expected. I've seen this face before. I've walked past it before. Back then. He couldn't stop. Orders. Perimeter. There was always something more urgent than a child's terror. But here, now, in a quiet American suburb with fallen leaves crunching beneath his boots, he had no orders. No excuse. He took a step closer. The girl turned her head just slightly, not enough to make eye contact, but enough for him to see the hollows beneath her eyes. Her lips parted. I don't want to get on. 5 words, barely above a whisper, soft as breath, but they tore something open inside him. The boy in the hoodie stepped onto the bus. She hesitated, then climbed the steps, one at a time, like they were blades. Just before she disappeared inside, she turned. Her eyes met his. Not pleading, not begging, just a look, one that said, if someone doesn't stop this, it's going to happen again. The door folded shut behind her. The bus rolled forward, its tires leaving shallow prints in dew. Caleb didn't move. Couldn't. He stood rooted at the curb, his pulse rising for reasons he didn't fully understand, watching the tail lights vanish into the fog. Back home, his apartment sat too quiet. Second floor. Always too clean. A TV murmured in the background. News anchors talking about storms out west or some congressional hearing. He didn't hear a word. He sat on the edge of his couch, wet shirt still clinging to him, holding a can of sparkling water in one hand that he'd never bothered to open. It was 7:04 a.m., and he couldn't stop thinking about the girl. Her voice. Those 5 words. The way she had pointed at the bus like it was something no one else could see. Not something physical, but something dark, sticky, and invisible that lived inside it. And her jeans. Still soaked. Still trying not to cry. He remembered Ethan, his own son. Just 13 when they found him. Caleb had been away on a temporary contract job. Missed 3 calls from the school. By the time he arrived, there were already police lines. Neighbors peeking out from behind curtains. He'd always told himself there was nothing he could have done. But now, as the clock ticked past 7:05, he realized something terrifying. He had stopped believing that. The guilt wasn't just lingering. It was blooming again, taking root in the silence. It had never left. It had just gone dormant, waiting for a face like that little girl's to wake it up. And now that it had, Caleb stood. He didn't grab his phone, didn't change out his sweat-damp clothes. He just walked to the window and stared out at the trees. Somewhere out there, the bus had made its second stop, and she was still on it. Caleb didn't go for his usual post-run shower. He didn't change, didn't check his email. He just sat at the small kitchen table, a folded towel under one elbow, the unopened can of water still in his hand. The morning light had crept across the hardwood floor now, warming the space, softening it. But his body stayed cold. Like whatever heat his muscles had generated on the run had been drained by that moment. That look. It wasn't terror. It wasn't even pain. He'd seen those too many times. What lived in the girl's eyes was quieter, like something already given up. He had seen it once before, Afghanistan, Fallujah. The day a civilian boy, maybe 10, had walked up to their convoy with a white flag made from a dish towel. Not waving it, just holding it, as if saying, there's no point fighting. Just do what you're going to do. That boy had died 10 minutes later in crossfire. They'd never even learned his name. And here, 2 decades later, on a suburban corner in the land he fought for, he just watched another child raise her own silent flag, pointing not at a soldier, but a school bus. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. The can of water hissed open under his fingers. Finally, he took one sip. It tasted like nothing. The room, with its military neatness, only made it worse. Not a frame out of place. Not a dish in the sink. His whole life, since discharge, had been an attempt to control what war made chaotic. But guilt didn't care about order. It seeped into the cracks. The ones even bleach couldn't scrub. Caleb reached for his phone. Not to call anyone. Just muscle memory. Instead, he opened the Notes app. Typed. School bus. Girl. Pink coat. About 7 to 8. Soaked pants. Whispered. I don't want to get on. Looked at me like she already knew no one was coming. He paused. Then typed. I should have done something. The words stared back at him like accusation. He erased them. Typed again. I should do something. That, at least, felt closer to the truth. By noon, the image still hadn't faded. He went about his day. Folded laundry. Swept the porch. Realigned the books on his shelf by spine color. Anything to feel useful. Anything but stillness. But at each pause, she returned. Not her voice. Just her stillness. How she didn't move until the bus door hissed open. How she didn't look up until she had to. How she never cried. Soldiers cry. Caleb had cried. More than once. Over the weight of another man's gear left behind. A folded flag, or the sound of gunfire in the distance on the wrong day. But she didn't. She had already folded into herself. Like Ethan. Ethan used to sit like that at the dinner table. Shoulders rounded, spoon moving but never lifting. And he used to say he was fine. Always fine. Until the day Caleb found the guitar case empty except for a torn notebook page. He never blamed Ethan. Not out loud. But he had never forgiven himself for missing the quiet signs. And now, another child had looked at him. Same silence, same surrender. And Caleb had done nothing but stand there like a lamppost. The guilt had a shape now. It looked like a pink coat, a soaked pair of jeans, and a backpack held like a shield. That night, the rain came. Soft, steady. It tapped against the window in uneven rhythm, as if the sky couldn't decide whether to cry or not. Time, 6:41 a.m. He clicked through tabs, looked up school policies. He wasn't sure what he was doing. He just knew he couldn't pretend tomorrow morning was any other morning. This time, he wouldn't run past. This time he would watch, not to interfere. Not yet, just to confirm that he hadn't imagined it, that the look she gave him still lived in the real world. Not just in whatever part of his heart had never fully left the desert. 6:17 a.m. came faster than he expected. He didn't sleep much. He rose, dressed in a plain hoodie and jeans. Neutral. Not military. Not threatening. Just someone out for a walk. The street was quiet when he stepped outside. Leaves, damp from the rain, clung to the sidewalk in reds and browns. Mist hovered low. By 6:39, he had reached the corner. She was already there. Same pink coat. Same grip on the backpack. Same unmoving stance. And he realized something as he stood across the street, watching from behind the elm tree. She hadn't just looked scared. She had looked alone. The kind of alone no child should ever have to carry. The bus came at 6:42. He'd seen it in fellow soldiers. The flinch before mortar fire, the subtle step back before a flashbang. June took a half step back. Not much, just enough to say, I don't want to do this. Caleb didn't move. He didn't want to scare her. Just stood still, arms crossed, blending into the mist. The yellow of the bus cut through the haze, its headlights dull in the early gray light. Then the hiss. The door opened. She didn't move at first, just froze. Then, without a glance back, climbed the steps one by one, her backpack like a shield between her and the world. And, just like yesterday, she turned before disappearing into the belly of the machine. Same look, same silence. This time, Caleb raised a hand, not to wave but just to acknowledge her. But she didn't see it. Or maybe she did and didn't want to. The bus swallowed her, and he stood there, left again with the echo of something he couldn't quite name. That afternoon, he found himself in front of an aging duplex with paint peeling at the trim. He double-checked the mailbox. Marla Dawson. He didn't knock. He couldn't. Instead, he stood for a moment, then left a yellow post-it note on the door. I live on Alder Street, just 2 blocks over. If you ever need help with a bus stop, I'm around. No pressure. See, he didn't sign the full name. Didn't want to sound official or strange, just present. That night, he sat at his table with an old notebook open. It was one of Ethan's, pages filled with half-written songs, math problems, doodles of spaceships, and skateboards. He hadn't opened it in over a year, but now, with his pen hovering above the margin, he started a list. Signs you almost missed. Shoulders always forward. Always fine. Laugh less at cartoons. Started locking the bathroom door. Gave away the dog treats. Took down the old photos from the fridge. He paused, then added. Didn't say goodbye the morning he left. He closed the notebook and pressed it to his chest, like it might give something back if he held it hard enough. But it never did. The next morning, he returned to the bus stop early. June arrived like always. Alone, wordless, small. This time, Caleb stood across the street, not hiding but not close. He didn't wave. Just nodded when her eyes flicked toward him. She looked down immediately. But he noticed her shoulders didn't flinch this time. The bus came. Same boy in the black hoodie. Same seat near the back. And Caleb saw it now. Not a punch, not a shove, but something meaner. The boy stepped aside just long enough to accidentally knock June's backpack off her shoulder. Not enough to hurt. Just enough to humiliate. She didn't react. Just picked it up and walked on. And Caleb knew that was the point. Not to hurt, but to make her feel like she couldn't exist without being lesser. The quiet kind of cruelty. He clenched his fists in his pockets. Not out of rage, but helplessness. Because now he saw it clearly. And seeing wasn't enough. That evening, a soft knock came at his door. When he opened it, a woman stood there, late 30s, worn coat, tired eyes. She held a post-it in one hand. You left this, she said. Her voice was cautious. I'm Marla, June's mom. Caleb didn't smile. Smiling felt too much like pretending. He started then stopped. I saw her. The last couple mornings. She looked scared. I thought you might need to know. Marla looked away, jaw tight. She doesn't talk much lately, she said. Always tired. She wets the bed sometimes. I thought it was just a phase. Caleb said nothing. The silence hung between them, heavy but not accusing. I don't know what to do, she whispered. He didn't either. But for once, he didn't feel like he had to offer a fix. Instead, he stepped aside and asked quietly, Do you want to come in? She didn't, but she stood on his porch another 10 minutes, talking in pieces, about being a single mom, about losing her husband in a car crash, about how grief doesn't knock. It just moves in and never leaves. How June changed after the new school. How hard it was to know if it was just growing up or something worse. And Caleb listened, not like a counselor, like someone who had also let silence stay too long. That night, he wrote another note in Ethan's old book. The smallest things matter. The way she grips her backpack, the half step backward, the wet jeans, the look that stayed. The next morning, Caleb didn't run. He didn't even lace up his boots. He stood at his window, watching fog roll off the neighbor's roof like steam from an old kettle. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked once and fell quiet. Leaves clicked against the pavement, already brittle with the season. And right on time, 6:41, the yellow bus rounded the corner of Birch Lane, headlights dull, engine wheezing like a smoker in the cold. Caleb didn't go outside. Not yet. He watched from behind the glass as June stepped forward from the shadow of the stop sign. Her posture was the same, rigid, folded inward like paper. But this time she looked back. Just a glance. Not long, but long enough. Then she got on. No stambe, no hesitation. But the way she clutched her backpack to her chest, knuckles gone pale, it said more than any words could. Caleb didn't move for another 10 minutes. He just stood there, watching the nothing that remained. The same nothing Ethan used to leave behind after school. That strange quiet that hung in the room when the door clicked shut, like sound itself knew to stay away. He remembered the first time he noticed Ethan had stopped singing in the mornings. It wasn't abrupt. It was worse. It was gradual. First, the humming disappeared, then the tapping fingers on the table, then the eye contact. By the time he noticed the silence, it had already buried something. That was the part that haunted him most. Not what had happened, but how long he'd let it happen before he noticed. That afternoon, he walked. Not far. Just enough to clear his head. He passed by the school. Elkwood Elementary. Neat building. Red bricks. Little flags hanging from the lampposts. Some for fall, some for kindness week. It looked safe. It looked like a place you could trust. But so had Ethan's middle school. And so had a dozen others he read about in the years since. Kids didn't bleed out in cafeterias. They evaporated slowly. Day by day, smile by smile. He paused near the playground. Kids ran across the yard, laughing, chasing. But he couldn't find her. June wasn't among them. Later that evening, he found himself back at Marla's doorstep. She opened the door before he knocked. "I was in a call," she said. "I just didn't know what to say." Caleb nodded. "You don't have to say anything." But she did. "She didn't eat lunch today," Marla whispered. Her thermos came back full. She wouldn't tell me why. They stood in the doorway for a long moment. "Can I see the backpack?" Caleb asked, careful with his tone. Marla hesitated, then disappeared inside. Returned with a small blue backpack that looked like it had been washed too many times. He unzipped it gently. Inside, a drawing crumpled between two textbooks. A school bus, roughly sketched. Inside, a small figure huddled in a corner seat. Next to it, a bigger figure, faceless, limbs darkened with heavy pencil strokes. Below it, written in uneven, slanted print, "If I tell, Mommy will have an accident too." Caleb felt his throat tighten. He handed it back, careful not to let his fingers shake. "This isn't nothing," he said quietly. Marla wiped her face with the sleeve of her shirt. "I thought she was just shy. You know? New school. No friends yet. I thought she needed time." "We always think that," Caleb said. Not as a dig. Not as judgment. As confession. That night, he didn't turn on the lights. He sat in the dark, the notebook open on his lap. He wrote, "Ethan once said he was fine. June doesn't even say that much. But silence isn't peace. Silence is just noise wearing a quiet face." He stopped, closed the notebook, and whispered into the dark, "I'm sorry." Not to Ethan, to himself. Because somewhere deep down, he knew, if he hadn't forgiven himself, he'd never be able to help anyone else. And if he couldn't help this little girl now, then what was the point of surviving war? Just to let another one happen in silence? Caleb arrived at the school office just before noon. He had shaved, tucked in his shirt, even ironed the collar, though his hands trembled faintly while doing it. Not from fear, exactly, but from that familiar weight. The one you carry not in your shoulders, but behind your ribs. The kind you mistake for your own heartbeat until someone tells you it's grief. The woman at the front desk didn't look up right away. She was typing slowly, deliberately, as if each keystroke cost her something. "Can I help you?" she asked, finally glancing over the top of her glasses. "I'm here about a student," Caleb said, tone even. "June Dawson. I'm her mother's cousin, temporary guardian." A pause, just long enough to feel it. "Do you have an appointment with the principal?" "No, but I was hoping I could ask a few questions." She scanned him, head to boots, and must have decided he wasn't a threat, or maybe just not worth the trouble. "Take a seat. I'll see if Ms. Reyes is available." He sat on a plastic chair that groaned under his weight. Across from him, a faded poster read, "Bullying stops here," in bright bubble letters. A cartoon fist crushed the word mean. He stared at it, unblinking. The hallway was silent, too silent for a place filled with children. Or maybe he just couldn't hear anything beyond his own thoughts anymore. When the principal finally called him in, she did so with a voice that had perfected the art of neutrality. "Good afternoon. Principal Reyes. Please have a seat." She was in her 50s, hair pulled back into a bun, so tight it looked like it hurt. The office was tidy, every file lined up, every plaque level. A place that didn't allow for questions without appointments. "I understand you're here about June Dawson," she said, sitting down opposite him. Caleb nodded. She's been staying with me for a bit, he began. Her mom's working long hours. Reyes tilted her head, polite but distant. She's a quiet student. Doesn't disrupt. Our teachers haven't noted any major concerns. She wets the bed. She doesn't eat lunch. She trembles when the bus pulls up. Reyes didn't blink. Our transportation system is regularly monitored. Our drivers are trained. If anything happened, I'm confident it would have been logged. There it was. The shield. Smooth, rehearsed. Bureaucratic kindness. Caleb leaned forward, elbows on knees. Then checked the tape. Her smile faltered just slightly. Tape. Bus cam footage. Route 12. Morning pickup. Past 3 days. We only review those in cases of confirmed incident or formal complaint. He said nothing. Just let the silence stretch until it grew teeth. 20 minutes later, he stood in a small room down the hall, watching footage on a grainy monitor. The timestamp read, 6:42 and 11 seconds a.m. The footage showed exactly what he feared. No punches, no yelling, nothing that screamed for attention. But everything was there. June stepping on board, backpack high, arms wrapped like a harness. The older boy, taller, darker clothes, accidentally stepping backward just as she passed, making her collide with the seat edge. Then, a flick of his foot to nudge her backpack down the aisle. She didn't flinch, didn't cry, just bent down, picked it up, and walked to the back. Like she practiced it, like it was normal. And the driver, eyes on the road, motionless, either blind or too used to looking away. Caleb didn't realize his fists were clenched until the principal asked, softly, "Do you recognize the boy?" "No," he said, but he would now. He walked out of that room changed. Not raging, not storming, just steadier, like a man who had seen fire before and knew how it started. He passed by the bulletin board outside the office. Kids' drawings, class photos, a few thank you notes from local businesses. And one image caught his eye. A teacher, mid-30s, red hair in a loose braid, smile tired but kind. Ms. Ainsley, grade 2B. He didn't know why, but something about her expression, hopeful but worn, like someone who stayed late more often than not, made him pause. That night, Caleb opened his notebook again. Wrote, "She doesn't scream. That's why they don't see her. The wounds without sound are the ones that grow deep." Then below it, almost like a prayer, "If I turn away now, I'm no different than the driver." He closed the notebook and sat in the dark a long time, just breathing, listening to the hum of the fridge, thinking of Ethan, and of June, alone in the back of that bus, carrying more than a backpack. The next day, Caleb returned to the school, not with fists clenched, not with demands, but with a question he hoped someone might be willing to answer. He waited until recess, when the front yard of Elkwood Elementary came alive with the sound of children released into air that smelled faintly of wood chips and autumn. He didn't go near the building, not yet. Instead, he stood near the fence line, arms resting on the top rail, eyes scanning the blur of motion, jump ropes slapping concrete, jackets flaring open like wings, sneakers skidding across gravel. But not June. He didn't see her. What he did see was the red-haired teacher from the bulletin board. Mess. Ainsley, standing a little apart from the other staff, holding a clipboard against her chest like a buffer. Her eyes followed her students without trying to control them. There was something in her posture that said she noticed what others didn't. When Caleb approached, he did so slowly, palms open, shoulders soft. No uniform. Nobody. Just presence. "Excuse me," he said. "Do you teach second grade?" She turned. For a beat, she didn't answer. Her eyes flicked from his face to the school behind him, as if calculating the risk of a stranger standing too close to the fence. But then something in his voice must have registered, because her shoulders lowered half an inch. "Edo. I'm helping take care of a girl in your class," he said. "June Dawson." At the mention of the name, her lips pressed together. Not tightly, but like someone trying to hold something fragile between their teeth. "I think," she began, then stopped. "She hasn't been herself lately." Caleb nodded. He didn't fill the silence. Let come at its own pace. "She used to tell me about bugs," Ms. Ainsley said finally. "Little things she found in the playground mulch. She drew a lot. Nothing fancy, just crayon creatures. Big eyes, wings. Last week she stopped." "Talking?" he asked. She shook her head. "Drawing." They stood together for a moment, the sound of children distant somehow, like it came from another world. Caleb stared out over the playground, his eyes scanning for a pink coat, even though he already knew she wasn't there. "Do you know where she sits on the bus?" he asked, voice low. "I don't," she said. I assumed the younger kids had assigned seats, separated from the older ones. At least, that's how it used to be. That last sentence clung in the air like smoke. You've seen something? Caleb said, not accusing, not even asking, just stating it as someone who'd been trained to read the subtle flinch of honesty, try and stay hidden. Ms. Ainsley looked away, toward the school. I saw her notebook last week, she said. It had a full page scribbled out in gray pencil. Not a drawing, just gray. And there was a footprint on her backpack the other day. A dirty one. I told myself maybe she dropped it in the hall. Kids are messy. Her voice broke for the briefest second, then found itself again. I told myself a lot of things. Caleb waited. She looked at me during quiet reading time. She didn't say anything, just held eye contact. For almost 10 seconds. And I knew right then. She was begging me to notice. And did you? MS. Ainsley's throat moved, as if she had to swallow something sharp. I noticed too late. Later that day, Caleb sat in his truck parked 2 blocks from the school. The dashboard clock glowed 2:45 p.m. The dismissal bell would ring in 10 minutes. He stared at the gate, engine off, hands on his knees. He didn't feel brave. He didn't feel righteous. He felt like a man standing outside a room he should have entered long ago. At 2:54, the first wave of children began spilling out of the building, backpacks bouncing, sneakers squeaking. Parents waited in small clusters. Hugs, waves, car doors slamming shut. And then, there she was, June, last in line, her gait careful, arms wound tight around her backpack straps. Caleb didn't move. He just watched. She didn't run, didn't smile, but something in her posture, some invisible line along her back, seemed slightly less curled. And then, out of nowhere, a boy stepped beside her. Tall, black hoodie, same as before. He leaned in too close. Caleb couldn't hear what he said, but he saw June's face change, not dramatically, just a slight pull at the mouth. The way her eyes dropped to the concrete. The way her steps slowed but didn't stop. She didn't cry. She didn't freeze. She just disappeared a little more. And Caleb knew. He'd seen that moment before. Not on a playground, not near a bus, but on a rooftop in Kandahar, when a young private named Torres was cornered during downtime by 2 older soldiers with clipped grins and dangerous eyes. No punches, just words, just pressure. And Torres had smiled the next day. Said he was good. 2 weeks later, he'd walked into the wrong firefight without backup. Everyone had called it bad luck. Caleb hadn't believed that for a second. He pulled out his phone, opened the Notes app, and typed. 2:56 p.m. June walks slower when Hoodie Boy appears. Leans in, too close. No laughter, no smiles, no eye contact. She shrinks. He saved the note, then sat there. The engine stayed off. The silence felt earned now. Not like avoidance, but like a man bracing for something long overdue. The wall was beginning to crack. Not loudly, not all at once. But he was no longer watching from behind it. That night, the halls of Elkwood Elementary were mostly dark, the fluorescent lights on motion sensors buzzing softly as Ms. Ainsley stayed behind. She often did. The quiet gave her room to breathe. Her classroom was still warm from the sun, dust motes floating lazily through the shafts of fading light. Desks in small clusters. Jackets forgotten on the backs of chairs. The smell of erasers and dry paper. She moved slowly through the room, collecting notebooks from each student's cubby for weekend grading. One by one, sliding them into her canvas tote bag without much thought, until she reached June's. It was wedged in tight, as if she'd forced it in, try to hide it. Ms. Ainsley hesitated, then eased it free. The cover was bent, the corners frayed. It didn't look like something a child carried. It looked like something a child held on to. She opened it, careful not to tear anything. Most pages were blank. A few had simple math problems, some vocabulary lists. But halfway through she stopped. There was a single sheet, folded in quarters, pressed between the pages. She unfolded it slowly. It was a drawing. Pencil-on-line notebook paper, smudged, rough. A school bus, crudely sketched, but unmistakable. Inside, rows of windows. And in the back, 2 figures. One was tall, the proportions wrong. Arms too long, legs bent at odd angles, no face. Just a dark oval where a head should be. Next to it, a much smaller figure. Drawn curled inward, knees to chest, no features, just one wide, dark on a backpack almost as big as the body. At the bottom, in shaky, childlike handwriting. If I tell Mom, she'll disappear like Dad. Ms. Ainsley froze. Her hand trembled slightly, not out of shock but out of recognition. This wasn't just a child's fear. It was a bargain, a decision made in secret. Protect the one person you still have by swallowing everything else. She sat down slowly at June's desk, still holding the paper. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that made her want to cry. The next morning, she didn't go straight to the office, didn't file a report. She went to Caleb. She found him outside, leaning against the chain-link fence near the playground, eyes scanning the yard not for June, but for something that couldn't be seen. The kind of looking only a father who had lost a child understood. "You were right," she said without preamble. He turned. Ms. Ainsley handed him the folded drawing, now placed gently inside a sheet protector. He opened it, eyes scanning slowly. He didn't say a word, but something in his jaw locked tight. Something in his chest shifted. "I wanted to believe it wasn't that bad," she said, voice thin. Caleb nodded, not in agreement, but in understanding. "She's protecting her mother," he said. "She's made herself small so no one else gets hurt. And we let her," she whispered. "No one ever teaches us how to see it," Caleb said, "until it's too late." He folded the drawing back up, slid it into his jacket pocket like evidence from a crime scene no one wanted to solve. "Do you think the principal will listen now?" she asked. Caleb didn't answer right away. "I don't know," he said, "but I'm not leaving without trying." That night, Marla sat on the edge of June's bed, watching her daughter sleep. The room was dim, lit only by a night light shaped like a crescent moon. The walls were plain. No posters, no drawings, just one small sticker near the window, half torn, a butterfly whose wings were fading. She reached out, brushing hair from June's forehead. Her daughter's breathing was steady, but her arms were tight around the backpack, even in sleep. Marla's chest ached. She remembered the way June used to hum to herself at bedtime, the way she used to leave tiny drawings under Marla's pillow just to say she loved her. Now there were only these long silences, these blank stares, the way her body curled inward. She had told herself it was just adjustment, a new school, grief, but the truth had been in front of her. In the laundry she kept finding balled up under the sink, in the bite marks on pencils, in the way June never wanted to sit near a window. She lowered her head until it touched the edge of the mattress, and whispered, like a mother praying to no one, "I'm sorry, baby. I didn't see. I didn't know how." In the other apartment, Caleb stood over the sink, rinsing out a coffee mug he hadn't used. The drawing lay flat on the counter, weighted by a book to keep it from curling. He stared at it, at the crooked windows, the dark faceless shape, and the tiny girl beside it. He ran a towel over his hands, slow, precise, then folded it. Wrote in his notebook, "I failed Ethan because I didn't know what to look for. I won't fail her because I'm too afraid to look again." Then he closed the notebook, slid it in his back pocket, and picked up the drawing. This time, he knew exactly where to take it. Caleb stood outside the principal's office at 7:58 a.m. The building hadn't warmed up yet. Fluorescents buzzed. The hallway smelled faintly of floor polish and paper. Around him, the school was just waking. Teachers arriving with coffees, students tugging at zippers, secretaries flipping light switches. He held June's drawing in one hand. His other hand was closed in a fist, not out of anger, but so he wouldn't fidget. He didn't knock. He waited until the door opened from the inside. Principal Reyes stepped out, startled slightly to see him there. "Mr. Caleb," he said, June's guardian. She looked down at the drawing in his hand. The plastic sleeve caught a bit of the light. "I need 10 minutes," he said. She studied him a second longer than was comfortable. Her eyes sharp, but not unkind. Just tired, like someone who'd grown too used to the language of forms and policies. "Combien?" The office looked the same. Diplomas on the wall. A small plant near the window. A framed quote behind her desk. "Be the change." Caleb remained standing. He placed the drawing on her desk, then slid it forward until it touched the edge of her stapler. "She drew this," he said quietly, "yesterday." Reyes reached for it, unfolded, looked. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then, carefully, she set it back down. "I see a school bus," she said neutrally, and a figure beside her. Possibly a student. In this line, Caleb tapped the bottom corner. "If I tell Mom, she'll disappear like Dad." "You think that's just fiction?" Reyes leaned back slightly, arms crossing over her chest. "I don't dismiss concerns," she said, "but we require more than drawings to act. I've watched the footage. I've spoken with her teacher. I've seen how June shrinks when the bus arrives. That's not nothing. No one has reported physical harm. It's not always physical." Reyes sighed, not out of frustration, out of routine. I've been here 16 years, she said. I've seen hundreds of kids. Some are sensitive. Some act out. Some withdraw. We do our best. But we can't act on every hunch. Caleb stepped forward, not aggressive, just closer. Did you serve? He asked suddenly. She blinked. Excuse me. Overseas. Kumba. Did you see what happens when you wait for a line to be crossed? Reyes's eyes narrowed. No, she said slowly. I did, he said. I watched a 19-year-old break in half from pressure no one saw, because it didn't leave bruises. He leaned in, voice low. Steady. She's not going to tell you, because she's too busy trying to protect the only parent she's got left. But I see the signs, and I think in your gut, you do too. There was no threat in his voice, only history. Reyes glanced again at the drawing. Her hand hovered above it, then lowered. I'll call on her bus driver, she said quietly. And her teacher. We'll start with a conversation. Caleb didn't thank her. He didn't move. He just nodded. Because when you're carrying grief, you learn that victory never looks like a parade. Sometimes, it looks like a woman quietly agreeing to look again. Outside the school, the wind picked up. Leaves skated across the sidewalk like messages with nowhere to land. Caleb stepped into the parking lot. Across the street, a boy in a black hoodie leaned against a utility pole, kicking gravel, earbuds in. Caleb didn't confront him. Didn't even cross the road. He simply stood there, watching long enough for the boy to notice. Their eyes met. Just a flicker. Just one beat too long to ignore. The boy looked away. And for the first time, Caleb saw something small. Not fear, not guilt, but doubt. And that was enough. Not a solution. Just the beginning of an ending. That night, he told Marla everything. The drawing. The meeting. The boy. They sat in the kitchen. Lights low. A pie crust half rolled on the counter between them. June was asleep. Marla didn't speak at first. Then she whispered. Memories he never talked about. Regret he wore like a second skin. Marla reached across the table. Touched his wrist. You didn't fail him, she said. He didn't answer. But the next morning, casting a pale wash over the folding chairs arranged in a careful semicircle. Marla hadn't planned on coming. The flyer had come home in June's backpack. A crumpled handout titled Parent Voices. Safe Schools Discussion. She had almost thrown it away. But something in Caleb's voice the night before, something in the way he had said Ethan's name without flinching, without flailing, had stayed with her. So here she was. She sat near the edge, hands folded in her lap, watching as other parents filtered in. Some wore lanyards from their jobs. Some came in gym clothes. But something passed between them. Not accusation. Not apology. Just knowing. The moderator, a school counselor named Janet, opened the meeting gently. We're here because our kids carry more than books in those backpacks, she said. Sometimes, they carry things we don't see. Things we didn't give them. And tonight, we're not here to blame or fix. We're just here to tell the truth. No one clapped. No one shifted. But somehow, that silence felt like the beginning of something honest. Janet invited anyone to share. A father spoke first, about bullying when he was a kid, how it made him silent around his own children now. Then a teacher spoke, then a grandmother, and then the woman in the red coat stood up. Her name was Angela. Her voice trembled slightly, but she didn't sit back down. My son is in 4th grade, she said. He's smart. He's funny. He's angry. She glanced around the room, as if expecting to be stopped. He's been different since his dad left, she continued. There's this hardness in him, like he's trying to protect something inside by hurting everything outside. A long breath. I found something in his bag. A drawing. It was a picture of the school bus. And him, standing over someone smaller. No words. Just shadows. No one moved. She looked down at her hands. I didn't want to come here tonight. I thought, if I stayed home, this wouldn't be real. But it is. She met Marla's eyes again. Streetlights flickered. Leaves skittered along the pavement like things trying to be noticed. She stood near her car, watching her breath form and vanish. Angela approached. No pretense. Just a quiet walk, a small exhale. You're June's mom, she said. Marla nodded. I am sorry. Marla didn't say anything. I think he's been hurting her, Angela whispered. A gust of wind cut between them. Marla's eyes closed for a second. Not from pain, but from the weight of finally hearing it out loud. I don't know how to stop him, Angela said, voice cracking. You just did, Marla replied. Silence. Then, Angela reached in her coat, pulled something out. A folded piece of paper. Another drawing. She handed it to Marla. It showed 2 trees. One big, one small. The big one had a crack down the middle. The small one had a branch reaching across. Beneath it, "If you break, I'll hold you." "He left it on the table this morning," Angela said. "Maybe there's still time." That night, Marla sat on the edge of June's bed again. She opened the new drawing slowly, placing it beside June's pillow. And, for the first time in weeks, her daughter stirred. Not afraid, not restless, just enough to shift toward the shape of her mother, sitting beside her. And Marla didn't move. She just sat there, one hand on the edge of the mattress, the other holding a paper tree with a broken trunk and a reaching branch. The next morning, Caleb arrived at the school earlier than usual. He didn't wait near the gate. Instead, he stood by the low stone wall near the rear sidewalk, the one that wrapped around the parking lot and faced the bus lane. Quiet, tucked away, mostly ignored by everyone except the janitor with a smoking habit and the occasional sixth grader looking to skip a few minutes of class. He stood there for one reason. He wanted to see the moment she got off the bus. Wanted to watch her, not to confront, not to question, but to understand. The bus wheezed to a stop. The door opened. Children spilled out in their usual bursts, jackets half on, conversations mid-sentence. And then, June stepped down, slower than the rest. She didn't scan the sidewalk like she usually did. Her eyes stayed low. Behind her came another boy, Tahir, hands shoved into his pockets, hoodie drawn tight. His steps matched hers, not too close, not too far. A tether of tension invisible between them. He didn't shove her, didn't speak, but as she paused to adjust her backpack, he didn't go around her either. Just stood, waiting. And when she looked up, hesitant, uncertain, he looked back, then did something unexpected. He moved aside, not with drama, not with apology, just enough for her to pass. And he nodded once. Barely emotion. A flicker of something, not regret, not clarity, but the beginning of both. Caleb didn't breathe, didn't move, but something in his chest nodded. Later that day, Ms. Ainsley found June's drawing journal back in its cubby. She hadn't left it there, hadn't assigned anything. She opened it slowly. On the first page, 2 stick figures. One with a hoodie, one with pigtails. No speech bubbles, just a bench between them, drawn in soft pencil lines like something that might vanish if you press too hard. Underneath, June had written in blocky letters. He said nothing, but he let me sit. Marla got the call that afternoon. It was the principal. "I thought you should know," Reyes said. "There was a moment today, on the playground. One of our aides saw June sitting with another student. He offered her a snack. Nothing big, but she accepted it." Marla closed her eyes. "I think we're beginning to see some movement," the principal added. Still early, but Marla didn't need her to finish. She hung up the phone and just sat with it. That word, movement, not progress, not healing, just the shift of something once frozen, like thawing. That evening, Caleb passed by the same boy near the fence. This time, the kid saw him coming and didn't look away. Caleb didn't stop. He just gave a small nod. The boy's shoulders stiffened, but he nodded back. It wasn't enough. It wasn't justice, but it was a start. Because sometimes the deepest apologies are the ones that never reach your lips. They live in changed steps, in space made for someone smaller, in sitting quietly beside someone you once hurt, and letting them choose if they want to stay. That night, June asked for a second blanket. The paper, a leftover math worksheet, folded the wrong way. But June didn't throw it away. She placed it carefully on the windowsill in her room, next to a chipped mug holding her colored pencils. The morning light filtered through the thin paper, making it glow faintly. She watched it for a long time. It didn't move, didn't rise, didn't fly, but stayed. And for her, that was enough. Ms. Ainsley had taught them the cranes during art hour the day before, after someone donated a pack of origami paper to the school. Most of the kids made frogs, stars, spaceships. But June sat at the far corner of the table, head low, lips pressed tight. Fold, press, turn, fold again. There was a rhythm to it, a quiet ritual, like breathing with her hands. Ainsley handed her the whole packet. That evening, Marla found 6 cranes on the kitchen table, folded from scratch paper, old magazines, a receipt. All small, all fragile, all pointed forward. She didn't say anything, just sat down beside them, ran her finger gently along the edge of one wing. She didn't ask what they meant. She didn't have to. In the apartment upstairs, Caleb stood in front of the same window he always looked through. Outside, the sky was low and gray, the kind of gray that blurred edges and made everything seem a little softer. He held a letter from the VA in one hand, an envelope unopened. He hadn't worked up the courage to read it. Not yet. But tonight, he was thinking about cranes. He remembered something Ethan once said, back when he was 10 and still believed in wishes. If you fold 1,000 cranes, a wish comes true. But maybe if you fold just one, someone might notice you. Caleb looked down at his calloused hands, then turned to his table, opened a drawer, pulled out a blank page, and began folding. Slowly, awkwardly, but with care. The next morning, June found a white paper crane sitting on the railing outside the building, just beside the flower pot with the wilting marigolds. It was neat, precise. Children shrieked in delight. But June stood still, watched as a few of her cranes, the ones she'd tucked behind the fence, caught the wind and scattered like birds startled from a wire. She didn't chase them. She just let them go, then reached in her pocket and pulled out a new sheet of paper and started again. Because sometimes healing doesn't mean holding on. It means folding again and again until you learn that the world still has space for softness. Even if no one claps, even if it flies away, even if it's just one crooked bird in a morning full of noise. The gym had been repurposed for the night. Fold-out chairs in straight lines. A makeshift stage draped with red and white bunting. The American flag tucked into the corner. Parents lined the walls with jackets folded over their arms, cameras in hand. The microphone made a soft pop when tested. No one really expected much, just a few third graders reading poems, the school choir singing about kindness, maybe a PDA announcement or two. But to June, it felt like stepping into a cathedral. Not because it was grand, but because it was big. Too big for a voice like hers. Too loud, too filled with eyes. She held her note card tight in one hand, her thumb smudging the edge from how long she'd been pressing it. The hallway behind the stage smelled like floor wax and faintly of someone spilled lunch. Marla crouched beside her, and especially not in places with too many people who might ask too many questions. His chair creaked when he shifted. He hadn't worn his uniform, just a clean button-down. The collar still a little stiff from the iron. The lights dimmed slightly. A music teacher walked on stage, her shoes squeaking softly. "We want to thank you all for being here," she began. "Tonight, our third graders will share something special with you." Each of them was invited to write a small note, just a sentence or two, about what it means to feel safe. We told them it could be anything. A place, a person, a memory. Caleb leaned forward, his hands clasped. Marla caught his eye across the rows. Just for a second, she gave the smallest of nods. And then June walked on stage. Someone in the audience coughed. And then she lifted her head. "I used to think safe meant no bad people," she said. "But now I think it means having someone wait by the gate." Silence. Not applause. Not even a clearing of throats. Just the sound of stillness. She looked toward the back of the room. Not directly at Caleb, but close. Then added softer. "It means someone saw me when I was scared." And stayed. She didn't cry. Didn't flinch. Just bowed slightly, turned, and walked back down. In the quiet that followed, the music teacher returned to the mic. "Thank you, June," she said, almost reverently. The rest of the evening passed like fog. Other students read. A choir sang. Someone's parent dropped a phone that clattered on the floor. But for many in that room, something had already shifted. Not because of what June said, but because of how she said it. Like it cost her something, and she gave it anyway. Outside, the night had cooled. Marla walked beside June, one hand on her daughter's shoulder. Caleb followed, just behind. No one said much. They passed the flagpole, where the rope clinked softly against the metal. The wind had picked up. June stopped. "I want to show you something," she said. She pulled out a paper crane from her coat pocket, creased but intact, and placed it at the base of the flagpole. "For Ethan," she whispered. Caleb froze. His breath caught, but he didn't speak. He only knelt beside her, placed a hand over hers, and together, they smoothed the corners of the little bird. Later, at home, Caleb took out the letter from the VA, opened it. Not uncertain. Marla was drying dishes, the faint sound of the kitchen radio murmuring an old folk song she didn't know the words to. June was coloring in the living room, her crayons laid out in a careful rainbow. Caleb had just stepped out for his evening walk, the one he took most days now, around the block past the library, to the edge of the ball field where Ethan's name was carved into the old wooden bench. The knock came again, still soft, still steady. Marla wiped her hands on a dish towel, glanced at June, then moved to the door. She opened it, and for a moment, just one slow breath, she wasn't in her apartment. She was in a hospital hallway. White walls, machines humming, a bed surrounded by silence. Because standing there, aged but unmistakable, was Dana Reeves, Ethan's mother. She looked thinner than Marla remembered. Her hair now streaked with silver, gathered at the nape of her neck. A scarf tucked neatly into her coat. Her eyes, once fierce with grief, were tired but calm. "Hi," Dana said. Marla didn't speak. "I was in the neighborhood," Dana added, with the kind of awkwardness that said she wasn't not really. "I heard Caleb was back." A pause, and I thought maybe I could say hello. Marla stepped aside without a word. Dana walked in slowly. Not like old friends, not like enemies, just two mothers who had loved the same boy in different ways. Marla pobrete. Dana didn't touch it. "He doesn't know I'm here," Dana said. "I figured." Marla replied. "He hasn't called." Marla nodded. "I don't blame him," Dana whispered. "I said some terrible things. After." She didn't finish. She didn't have to. After Ethan's death. The grief had come out sideways. Into blame, into silence, into long months of not returning calls. "He needed someone," Marla said quietly. "And I wasn't enough." Marla said after a while. Dana looked up. Not like a ghost. Like a brother. Tears welled. Not many. Just enough to blur the lines between past and present. "I miss him," Dana said. Marla nodded. "I know." A long silence followed. Not uncomfortable. Just deep. The kind that holds things too delicate for words. The door opened again. Caleb stepped in. He froze, his keys still in his hand. His face unreadable. Dana stood slowly. They didn't speak right away. They just looked at each other. The years, the hospital visits. The silence between them like a river they had never learned how to cross. "I didn't come to fight," Dana said. "I'm too tired to fight," Caleb replied. She took a step forward. "I just wanted to see you. To tell you, I kept his room the same. All these years. I thought maybe you want something from it. A book, or the shoebox with your letters." His mouth opened, then closed. He nodded, not in forgiveness, but in recognition. The past had happened, and they were still here. June peeked from the hallway. Caleb noticed her, held out a hand. She came to him, nestled her head against his side. Dana smiled, though her lips trembled. "She's beautiful," she whispered. "She's brave," Caleb said. Another pause. "Like Ethan." Dana turned toward the door. But before she left, she reached in her coat and pulled out a photo, worn, edges curled. It was of Caleb and Ethan, at 16, arms slung around each other, standing beside an old pickup, covered in dust, laughing. "I thought maybe she should have this," Dana said. Caleb took it carefully. "Thank you." And she left. That night, Caleb placed the photo on the dresser in June's room, next to her paper cranes. He didn't explain. He didn't need to. June looked at it for a long time. Then reached up and took his hand, and they stood there, together, not needing words. Because sometimes the past comes back not to haunt, but to return what was never properly buried. A friendship, a brother, a part of yourself you thought you'd lost forever. They didn't speak much on the way out of town. The road curved past the post office, the old grocery store with a faded open sign, and the little diner where Caleb once sat every Sunday with Ethan, both pretending the world outside didn't exist. The truck rattled, the glove box clinking with loose quarters and forgotten receipts. The radio stayed off. June sat in the passenger seat, legs swinging, her backpack between her knees. She'd packed it herself, her drawing pad, the folded cranes, a granola bar. When Caleb asked earlier that morning if she wanted to go see something, she didn't hesitate. She just nodded, then zipped her jacket like she knew it might be cold where they were going. The sky was heavy, not quite overcast, just gray in a way that made colors feel like they were speaking softer. Caleb's fingers tapped the steering wheel. He didn't know what he was going to say, or even if he should say anything at all, but his hands kept steering, and the road, as always, kept going forward. 20 minutes out, the town gave way to open field. Rust-colored grass stretched wide under the sky, framed by the faded fence posts and barbed wire that hadn't been replaced in years. A wooden sign leaned by the edge. Memorial Park, Veterans Field. Most people didn't come here anymore, not unless they had a reason. Caleb had avoided it for nearly 2 years. He pulled off the road, let the engine die. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of all the things that had been left unsaid between him and the world. June looked out. "What is this place?" she asked softly. "It used to be where we played ball," Caleb replied, his voice dry. Me and Ethan." They got out slowly. The field was mostly dead grass now, but the bleachers still stood, half-rusted. Bird droppings on the top row. A broken bat leaned against the dugout wall like it had waited all this time to be picked up again. June didn't run. She walked beside him, her small hand brushing his fingers now and then, like she was making sure he was still here. Caleb stopped at the edge of the infield. "This is where he first told me," he said, almost to himself. June looked up. "Told you what?" "That he was scared." He swallowed. "It was 2 days before his deployment. We came here just to hit balls, like we always did. But he just stood at the plate. Wouldn't swing. And then he said, 'I don't think I'm coming back.'" June didn't say anything. She just stood there, her eyes tracing the shape of the space he described. "I told him not to talk like that," Caleb went on. "I told him he was stronger than fear. That he'd make it." He paused. And he didn't. A gust of wind kicked up dust. June leaned into his side. "You were trying to help?" she whispered. "But I didn't," Caleb said, jaw tightening. "I told him what I thought he needed to hear, not what he really needed." He turned, facing her. "I've spent every day since wondering if I should have just let him be scared. Just sat with him in it. Not fixed it. Not fought it. Just been there." June opened her backpack. Took out one of the cranes. A blue one, folded a little better than the rest. She walked to the pitcher's mound and set it down. "Then be here now," she said. "With me." They sat on the grass. Caleb stretched his legs out, boots scuffing the dirt. June curled beside him, pulling out her notebook, drawing quietly. The field was still. Time moved slower here, and in that slowness, something settled in his chest. Not peace, not yet, but the loosening of something that had been clenched for too long. As the sun dipped lower, Caleb reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out the photo Dana had given him. He placed it on the ground between them. June looked over. "Is that him?" "Yeah," Caleb said. "He looks like he laughs a lot." He did. June paused, then whispered, "Do you think he'd like me?" Caleb looked at her wide, serious eyes, at the way her knees had grass stains, at the small ink mark on her thumb for drawing too much. "I think," he said slowly, "he'd be proud of you." She nodded, then leaned her head on his arm. The wind rustled the tall grass. The crane on the mound lifted, flipped once, then settled again. Caleb watched it, then closed his eyes. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't see the moment Ethan died. He saw the boy laughing behind the wheel of a dusty pickup. But not all of them need to hurt forever. Some can be folded, like cranes, set down in fields, left to rest in the sun. The box was old, worn at the edges. Folded notes, a tiny red mitten missing its pair, and one photograph, curled from time. June stood on a chair to reach it. She didn't ask for permission. Caleb was at the kitchen sink, washing a chipped mug. He heard the soft scrape of cardboard on wood. Then silence. He turned the faucet off. June was sitting cross-legged in the hallway, the box beside her. The contents spread around her like pieces of someone she had once been. She held the photograph. In it she was 4, standing on the porch with her mother. Hair in loose pigtails, eyes too wide, her mouth mid-cry. Caleb sat down across from her. "No rus. No questions. I used to stare at this picture when she left," June said, not looking up. "Try to remember if I did something wrong." Caleb's throat tightened. "I thought if I could figure out the day it changed, maybe I could go back to it. Fix it." She placed the photo down gently. "But I can't, and I'm tired of pretending I still want to." She picked up a marker, drew a line across the photo, not to ruin it, but to mark it, like saying, "This right here is where I stopped carrying you like that." Then she reached for a crane, and for the first time, she folded a photograph. The image vanished slowly between creases. A face halved, a porch bent into a wing. The crying mouth disappeared into the body of a bird. She pressed the final fold, then placed the photo crane in Caleb's hand. "I want to let her go," she whispered. "Not hate her. Just let her be gone." He didn't answer right away. He just held the crane. That night, they sat on the porch. The wind soft like it was listening. The stars out but not bragging. Caleb took the crane folded from the photograph and carried it into the backyard. He didn't bury it, didn't burn it. He just placed it under the dogwood tree. The ground was soft with old leaves. He pressed it gently against the roots. Not goodbye, just enough. In the distance, a dog barked. A screen door creaked. Life went on in small, clumsy ways. But in the breath of that night, with one photo no longer framed, with one little girl no longer waiting to be rescued, a man who thought he was broken finally stopped trying to fix things that weren't his to fix. He just sat there, hand on his knee, and let the quiet be quiet. The flag had hung there since before Caleb returned. Tattered now, its edges frayed from years of sun and wind, its red dulled to the color of dried earth. The stars, once stitched with proud precision, had started to come loose. From the street, it looked like any other flag on any other porch. Just another marker of service, of something that had once felt like honor. But to Caleb, it was something else. It was memory. It was guilt nailed to a wooden post, flapping in the air like it needed no permission to stay. Every time he passed it, the creak of the porch boards beneath his boots, the whistle of wind through its torn corner, he felt the weight of names not spoken aloud. Names he only said in his head when the world was quiet. Ethan, Benji, Mason, names from the sand, from the wire, from the long night roads. The flag was theirs in a way, and that made it harder to take down. That morning, Caleb stood just beneath it, coffee still steaming in his hand. June sat on the top step, braiding a scrap of red yarn into the mane of a stuffed horse she'd found in the donation bin at the church. She didn't ask what he was staring at. She didn't need to. "I've been thinking," he said softly, almost to himself, "about what it stands for, or what I wanted it to stand for." June kept braiding. "In basic training," he continued, "they tell you the flag means protection, unity, that no one gets left behind." He looked at the sky. Some of us didn't come home, and some of us did, but we're not really back. Not all the way. June didn't look up, but she spoke. What if it could mean something new now? The wind picked up, and the flag, as if hearing her, shifted. One torn corner came loose from the pole. Caleb reached up to catch it. It was instinct. How many times had he done this before? During storms, after long days, when the pole rattled at night, and he couldn't sleep. But this time, he didn't tie it back. He folded it. Slowly, carefully, one triangle at a time, his fingers moving with the same practiced care from years ago, when he had stood on dirt in a foreign country folding the flags of the fallen. But this wasn't ceremony. It was a farewell to the part of him that thought he had to carry everything alone. He brought it inside, set it gently in the hallway cabinet, then came back out with June's crane, the blue one she had folded the night she read on stage. He tied a string to it, hung it where the flag had been. It fluttered just once, then settled. That afternoon, a neighbor walking her dog paused on the sidewalk. She looked up at the porch, at the little blue paper bird turning gently in the breeze. "It's beautiful," she said. June, sitting nearby with her drawing pad, nodded. "It's for the ones who aren't here," she said, "and the ones who still are." The neighbor smiled, wiped the corner of her eye, then walked on. That evening, Caleb sat on the steps. June joined him, leaning her head on his shoulder. They didn't talk about the flag. Didn't need to. They watched the paper crane sway softly, casting a quiet shadow on the porch rail. It didn't shout, didn't wave with pride or sorrow. It just moved when the wind did, like it was saying, "We're still here, and we're still gentle." Later, Marla passed by the open door and paused. She watched them through the screen, man and child, neither speaking, both holding something unspoken between them like a shared lantern. She didn't interrupt, just pulled the door halfway closed, and let the evening keep them. Caleb didn't cry, but he breathed easier, not because the war was gone from him. It wasn't. It might never be. But for the first time, he had taken something heavy and placed it down, not in shame, not in silence, but in grace. And in its place, he had let a little bird fly. It came on a Thursday. The phone rang just once before Caleb picked it up. He'd been sanding the porch railing, shirt damp with sweat, sawdust clinging to his arms. June was inside, humming a tune she made up, cutting strips of paper for her next batch of cranes. The late summer sun lit the house golden, and everything had that strange stillness when a home, for a flicker of time, feels exactly like a home. Then the phone rang. Just once. Hello. A pause. Then a voice he hadn't heard in over 6 years. "Is this Caleb Monroe?" He didn't answer right away. Didn't need to. The voice filled the space like smoke. "This is Alan Shore. I was married to Kara." Kara, June's mother. That name hadn't passed through Caleb's lips in months. Not out of anger, but because it echoed too much. "I've been trying to find her," Alan said. "She's not picking up. Not answering her sister either. I thought maybe you knew where she was. Or where June is." Caleb's grip on the phone tightened. "She's safe," he said. Another pause. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Alan added quickly. "I just got back into the States. Been stationed overseas. I didn't even know she'd left until, well, everything got bad between us. And now, His voice cracked slightly. I just want to see my daughter. After the call, Caleb stood still for a long time. June's laughter floated from the other room. Soft, like the flutter of paper wings. He didn't know what to do with the ache that formed at his chest. It wasn't fear. Not quite. It was that old familiar weight. The feeling that no matter how far you'd carried something, someone else could come and take it from your hands. That love was temporary. That safety could vanish with a knock or a phone call. And still, he hadn't told her. Not about her father. Not the real story. Just enough for her to stop asking. Just enough to let her sleep. That night, Marla came out to the porch with 2 mugs. She didn't ask what was wrong. Just handed him one, then sat down beside him. The crane still swayed gently above them. She's been talking more, Marla said. At school. Smiling even. I know. Caleb whispered. I see it. She trusts you, Caleb. He looked down at the mug in his hands. I know. Marla waited. He didn't speak, but she saw the crease in his brow. The way his thumb moved along the rim of the cup. Is he back? She finally asked. He nodded once. Called this afternoon. She knows? No. A long silence. Then Marla said, You'll tell her when it's time. And he wanted to believe that. But time was a strange thing. Sometimes it ran toward you like a storm. In June's room, the nightlight cast soft shapes on the wall. She was asleep, one hand resting on a stack of folded cranes. Caleb stood in the doorway, watching her chest rise and fall. He remembered how she clung to him that first night. How her fear wasn't loud. It was quiet and constant, like water dripping from a leak you couldn't find. He remembered her eyes the day he showed up at the bus stop, and how she hadn't let go since. He walked outside, into the backyard, past the dogwood tree. The stars were faint that night, hidden behind thin clouds. He took a breath, then another, each one harder than the last. He pulled his phone out of his pocket, scrolled to the number Alan had given. His thumb hovered above it, and he waited, not because he doubted what to do, but because this was the moment he feared most, not the confrontation, but the letting in, letting someone else have a claim on something you'd learned to love fully. Not perfectly, just fully. The wind shifted, leaves rustled. He pressed call. It rang. Once, twice, 3 times, then a voicemail. He didn't leave a message, just stood there, phone still in hand. The crane above the porch turned slightly in the breeze, catching the corner of his eye. He looked up, and for the first time, he didn't feel threatened. He felt tired, but steady. The storm hadn't come yet, but he could feel it, and this time, he wasn't going to run. The knock wasn't loud. 3 taps. Measured. Careful. Like whoever stood outside didn't want to be there any more than the man inside wanted to answer. Caleb stood in the kitchen, dish towel still in hand. The morning light hadn't fully broken through the blinds yet. June was in her room, still asleep. Marla had left for the clinic early. He waited a beat, then another. The knock came again. This time, Caleb walked to the door. Alan Shore stood on the porch, hands in the pockets of his worn bomber jacket, boots coated in dust from the road. His face wasn't how Caleb remembered it. Not that he'd ever known it well. Only from a photo Kara had shown him once, back when everything between them was still hopeful. Now, the man in front of him looked tired in a way that wasn't physical. There was a sag to his shoulders that spoke of years lost, not miles traveled. You must be Caleb, Alan said. His voice was quieter than on the phone. Caleb nodded. Neither offered a hand. May I come in? Alan asked, glancing toward the window. I won't stay long. Caleb stepped aside. She's still sleeping. I won't wake her. They sat at the kitchen table. No coffee. No small talk. Just 2 mugs already cold and a silence that settled in like dust. Alan ran a hand through his hair. I wasn't a good husband, he said. Probably not a good man either. But I was trying. God knows I was trying. Caleb said nothing. Alan looked toward the hallway. I don't even know what she looks like now. She draws, Caleb said. A lot. Paper cranes, mostly. Alan smiled faintly. She always liked birds. I remember, when she was 2, she chased a seagull down a beach in Virginia. Almost ran straight into the water. Caleb didn't smile. He studied the man in front of him. The way his fingers tapped restlessly against the table. The way his gaze never quite held still. What do you want from her? Caleb asked, voice low. Alan looked up. I don't know. There was no defense in his tone. No arrogance. Just something close to regret, smoothed over by time. I didn't come to take her away, he added. I wouldn't even know how. I wanted to see her. To let her know I'm alive. That I didn't forget. Caleb stared at the wood grain of the table. You forgot long enough. Alan nodded. I did. A long pause. Then Caleb stood, walked to the sink. He He didn't know what he was waiting for. Maybe for Alan to push. Maybe for himself to say no. But neither happened. Instead, Alan stood slowly. If she doesn't want to see me, he said, I'll understand. Just don't lie to her for me. Don't protect me from the truth. Let her choose. He walked to the door, hand on the knob, paused. Then, she has your eyes. Caleb turned. Alan shook his head gently. Not literally, but that same way of looking at the world. Like everything's been broken once. And she's trying to put it back together without the instructions. He opened the door. Thank you for keeping her safe. Then he was gone. Caleb stood alone in the kitchen. The sun had shifted. Light hit the table now, casting long shadows from the two untouched mugs. He walked outside. The air smelled like cut grass and wormwood. From the porch, he watched Alan disappear down the road, his figure shrinking with every step. No fanfare, no confrontation. Just a man walking away from a place he never really belonged to anymore. Inside, June had woken. She stood in the hallway, barefoot, her hair tangled from sleep. Who was that? She asked. Caleb looked at her, took a breath, then said the words he'd practiced a dozen times and still didn't know how to say. Someone who used to be here, someone who missed a lot, but maybe wants to try again. June's expression didn't change. She just nodded once, then padded to the table, picked up one of the coal mugs, and poured it out. That evening, she drew a new crane. This one, she colored differently. A pale gray, with one wing blue, the other red. She didn't say what it meant, but she placed it on the porch beside the first, then sat beside Caleb. The wind picked up, the cranes fluttered, and for the first time, Caleb felt something strange in the wind. Not threat, not guilt, just space. Space for something new to begin. It began with a drawer that wouldn't close. June had been looking for tape, just tape. One of her cranes had torn at the wing, and she wanted to fix it before the paper gave in completely. The drawer in Marla's desk, the one near the hallway, had always stuck a little, swollen from years of humid summers. She tugged gently, then with more force, until it jerked open with a tired groan. And that's when she saw it, tucked beneath an envelope of old receipts and a box of bandages. A letter, folded neatly but worn at the edges, like it had been opened and closed a dozen times. Her name was on the front, in her mother's handwriting. She didn't read it at first. She sat on the floor, back against the hallway wall, letter in hand. The house was quiet, too quiet. Caleb was outside with Murphy, fixing a loose plank on the fence. The only sound was the occasional gust of wind tapping the screen door. She didn't move for a long time. Then, slowly, she unfolded it. My June, if you're reading this, then something has gone wrong. Or maybe it's finally gone right, and I've just left a mess behind me. You were never the reason I left. Please know that. If I could have taken you with me and given you something better, I would have. But I wasn't better. I wasn't even okay. I hope, by now, someone has shown you what safe feels like. I hope you've drawn 1,000 birds and none of them needed to fly away. And I hope, more than anything, that you forgive me, not for what I did, but for all the things I couldn't stay long enough to do. Love you even from far away. Mom. June read it twice, then 3 times. She didn't cry. She didn't know if she could anymore. Not for her. Instead, she folded it back into its worn creases, stood up, and went outside. Caleb was crouched by the fence, hammer in hand, brow furrowed in the late afternoon sun. She stood beside him until he looked up. What's that? He asked. She handed him the letter. Didn't say a word. He took it gently, reading in silence. When he finished, he didn't speak either. Just sat back on his heels, the hammer forgotten. Then he held the letter to his chest and closed his eyes. She left it, June finally said, but not for her. I think she wanted to be heard, even if she wasn't going to be forgiven. Caleb nodded. There's a difference, isn't there? She asked. Between being sorry and being different. He looked at her. There is. Do you think she meant it? I think, he said slowly, some people only learn how to love when they've already lost the chance to do it right. Doesn't make it enough. But it doesn't make it nothing either. They burned the letter that night. Not out of anger. Not to forget. But as a way of giving it back to the world without having to carry it anymore. The flames rose slow and steady in the fire pit. June stood close, watching the edges curl, the handwriting vanish into ash. Caleb stood beside her, a hand resting lightly on her shoulder. Later, she folded a crane from plain white paper. No colors, no drawings, just the quiet weight of something she had released. She placed it beside the others. 3 now, each one different. each one holding a piece of something no longer inside her. In the morning, the ash from the fire pit had scattered across the yard. The wind had taken most of it. What was left shimmered faintly in the sun, like dust from a memory too light to hold. And for the first time, the house didn't feel haunted. It just felt quiet and still, and hers. Caleb replaced the bulb on a Tuesday. It had been flickering for weeks, just a soft sputter above the porch. The kind that went unnoticed until you sat still long enough to notice how the dark crept closer each evening. He didn't announce it, didn't even write it on the to-do list pinned to the fridge. Just bought the bulb on his way back from the hardware store and changed it while June was brushing her teeth. It was a small thing, but some lights weren't meant to be bright, only constant. That night, June came out with her sketchbook. She didn't say anything about the light, just sat cross-legged on the top step, her pencil moving across the page in slow, steady strokes. Caleb brought out 2 mugs of cocoa, sat beside her. No questions, no stories, just the sound of pencil on paper, and the light overhead, steady as a heartbeat. Murphy lay at their feet, tail twitching in dreams. A breeze moved through the trees, rustling the leaves like someone turning the pages of a book. I've been thinking about cranes, June said finally. Caleb sipped his cocoa. Not just the birds, she added. The ones we make. I think each one takes something with it. Not to make it disappear, just to hold it somewhere else for a while. He nodded. Then maybe, she continued, when you've folded enough, you're not carrying it all alone anymore. She showed him the sketch. A porch, their porch, but with dozens of cranes hanging from the eaves, dancing in the wind like tiny kites. I think I want to make it real, she said. Not for decoration. For us. Caleb looked at the drawing and saw something he hadn't known he was waiting for. Not a plan, a promise. They spent the weekend folding. Old newspapers, wrapping paper, a map Caleb had used during his first tour, now faded and soft at the creases. Sheet music Marla no longer needed. Even receipts, shopping lists, pages from broken notebooks. Nothing was wasted. Each crane carried a history. A grocery list that once fed them through winter. A lullaby. A place Caleb had once stood under desert stars, wondering if he'd ever come home. Now, they would hang from the porch. Silent. Beautiful. Alive in a way paper wasn't supposed to be. At dusk on Sunday, they hung the first row. June climbed the step stool while Caleb tied the strings. One by one, the cranes rose. They didn't all hang straight. Some tilted, some spun, some fluttered with the lightest touch of wind. But they stayed, and when the porch light flicked on, it caught the paper in soft halos, like each crane had its own quiet glow. Marla came by with lemon bread. She stood at the gate for a long moment before walking up. This is new, she said, looking up. June nodded. They're memories. Yours. Ours. Marla looked at Caleb. He gave a small, knowing smile. It suits you, she said. The quiet. The light. This porch. Caleb didn't answer. He didn't need to. That night, after Marla had gone and the cocoa was gone and the sketchbook closed, June lingered on the steps. Will you leave? She asked. He turned to her, surprised. She didn't look at him, just at the cranes. You've been here, she said, and it's been good. But sometimes good things go. Caleb looked up at the porch light, then back at her. No, he said, not unless you ask me to. She nodded, didn't smile, didn't cry, just leaned against him, and stayed. Later, long after June had gone to bed, Caleb sat on the porch alone. The cranes whispered above him, and the light stayed on. He watched the yard, the trees, the fence, the mailbox leaning like an old man in the dark. It was all still here, and so was he. Not because he had nowhere else to go, but because, for once, he'd stopped running. He stood, hand resting on the porch post. Then, gently, he reached up and tied one more crane to the last hook. It was the one June had made from her mother's letter. Plain, white, uneven, but it held. The porch light flickered once, then glowed steady. The envelope came home in her backpack, tucked between math homework and a flyer about flu shots. June didn't mention it. She placed the stack on the kitchen counter like always, pulled a chair out, and started peeling a tangerine. It wasn't until later, when Caleb flipped through the pages, looking for her spelling quiz, that he saw it. A white sheet, crisp and folded, printed in bold letters across the top. Field trip permission form. Beneath that, must be signed by parent or legal guardian. The words sat on the page like something alive. He read them 3 times. Not because he didn't understand. Because he did. In the hallway, He heard June humming to herself, the tune she always returned to when folding cranes, slow, simple, like a lullaby passed down from memory instead of music. He placed the paper face down on the counter, left it there for an hour. Then two. That night, as June brushed her teeth, she called through the door. I forgot to ask, can I go to the museum next week? It's about birds. They said there'll be fossils and one of those, what's it called? Avian skeletons. She popped her head out, mouth full of foam. They gave me a paper. Did you see it? He nodded, wiping the counter. Yeah, I saw it. Cool. She disappeared back into the bathroom. The sound of running water filled the silence. When she emerged, her face clean and flushed from hot water, Caleb was standing by the counter again. He held up the permission form. Her eyes followed his finger to the line that said, Relationship to student. Neither spoke. June didn't move. Her hand slowly found the hem of her t-shirt. Fidgeted. I didn't know what to write, she whispered. Caleb looked at the blank space. The pen in his hand felt heavier than it should. He sat down. You know, he said, there's a lot of words people use for this sort of thing. She sat across from him, legs swinging under the chair. Guardian, foster parent, caregiver, uncle, family friend. He smiled gently. Paper doesn't ask how many nights someone waited outside your door till you stopped having nightmares. Doesn't ask how many lunches were packed, or who taught you to tie your shoes again when your hands were shaking too much to do it yourself. She said nothing, but her eyes shimmered. You don't have to say I'm your dad, Caleb said. Not unless you want to. Not unless it fits. But I want you to know. He paused. Put the pen down. I wake up every morning, and the first thing I think about is whether you're okay. And when something good happens to you, even small stuff like when you finally get that crane to balance right, I feel it here. He tapped his chest. She was still. Then she got up, walked around the table, wrapped her arms around him, tight and wordless. He signed a form. On the line marked, Relationship to Student. He wrote, The man who stays. Underneath, he added his name, then tucked it into her folder. The next morning, June held on his arm a little longer before walking toward the school bus. When she reached the top step, she turned back. You'll still be here? She asked. Caleb nodded. Porch light stays on. She smiled, then disappeared into the belly of the bus. He watched it drive off, kicking up dust. Felt something shift in his chest. Not like something breaking, like something loosening, like a thread finally unknotted. Back inside, he opened her sketchbook. A new drawing. The museum. The bones of a bird stretched wide like wings in flight. And in the corner, tiny but clear, a man standing next to the girl. No title, no names. Just two figures. Together. The museum was colder than expected. June clutched the sleeves of her hoodie as she stepped from the school bus, her breath visible in the morning air. She didn't complain, didn't tug at her teacher's sleeve like the other kids. She just watched the giant glass windows rise in front of her, reflecting back dozens of children in a sky that looked like it hadn't made up its mind yet. Inside, it smelled like polished wooden time. Bones towered overhead, birds frozen in impossible flight. There was something calming in it, how the wings never moved, but still carried the memory of soaring. June walked a little behind the group, not because she was shy, because she liked watching the way people moved when they thought no one noticed. Her friend, Ellie, looped her arm through June's and whispered, I wish I could fly, like actually lift off and not come down. June didn't answer right away. Then, not all birds fly. Some just stay and sing. Ellie blinked. Is that a quote or something? June smiled. No, it's just something I think about. Later, by the exhibit of extinct birds, the teacher gave them time to sketch. June sat cross-legged on the floor, her notebook balanced on her knees. She drew slowly, deliberately. One of the cranes overhead, its bones impossibly delicate, its wings outstretched as if still caught in the middle of the story. Ellie watched her for a minute, then asked, Do you have a dad? The question wasn't cruel, just curious, honest, like most things children say before adults teach them how to hide. June didn't flinch. She kept drawing. Then, without looking up, she said, He's not really my dad, but he makes me soup when I'm sick. He walks the dog even when it rains. And he never turns the porch light off. Not once. Ellie didn't respond right away. Then, sounds like a dad. June looked at her sketch, added a small figure sitting on the porch beneath the bird's shadow. He doesn't need the word, she said. Quietly, he just stays. The teacher, who had been standing a few feet away, had overheard. Her clipboard trembled slightly in her hand. She didn't say anything, Didn't need to. Back home, Caleb was sweeping the porch. A soft breeze stirred the hanging cranes, dozens now, twisting slowly in the sunlight. He checked the time. June wouldn't be home for another hour. But he set 2 mugs out anyway. Filled them with cocoa. Let them cool. Then sat on the step and waited. The dog lay beside him, tail wagging every so often, as if remembering something pleasant. When the bus finally pulled up, June stepped off slowly. She wasn't smiling, but she wasn't quiet either. She ran her fingers across the string of paper cranes as she walked up the porch. Then, as if it were nothing, said, "We saw birds with wings so wide you could walk under them like umbrellas." Caleb nodded. "Sounds beautiful." They were. But my favorite part was the shadow. He raised an eyebrow. She shrugged. Sometimes the best part of flying is just knowing something will catch your shape. She sat beside him, sipped the now lukewarm cocoa. They didn't talk much after that. Just watched the light change on the trees. Watched the wind move through the cranes. Watched the day settle into the bones of the house like it always had. Inside her sketchbook, June had written something under the bird she'd drawn. "The person who stays doesn't need a title. He's already the place I land." Caleb never saw it. She never showed it. But that night, as the porch light clicked on, steady and warm, he looked at her through the window. And in the way she moved, the way she quietly folded her next crane, he felt something shift. Not in her. In him. Not a letting go. A letting in. The letter came in early spring. No return address. Just a name written in blue ink that looked like it had been pressed harder than it needed to. Private Benjamin Rusk. Caleb stood at the mailbox for a while. His boots in the gravel. The dog lying by the gate. The flag on the porch moving slow in the wind. He didn't open it right away. He put it in his back pocket. Fed the dog. Let the screen door slam shut behind him. June was inside, building something out of popsicle sticks and string. A bridge for birds, she called it. So they have somewhere to land besides wires and fences. Caleb smiled, but didn't mention the envelope. That night, after June fell asleep, her room filled with cut paper and crumpled ideas, Caleb sat on the porch. The porch light hummed gently above him. He unfolded the letter with the kind of care reserved for landmines or prayers. It was short, 3 paragraphs. No hello. Just. You asked if I remembered what he said. Before he ran back. Caleb exhaled. I said I didn't, but I lied. He said, "Tell Caleb I was already home." Then, I couldn't carry that then. I hope he can now. No signature. Just the wind picking up. Caleb sat still, the paper in his lap, softening in his hands. He looked out at the dark, not searching for anything, not hiding either. The porch light cast its slow, steady glow across the steps. Inside, the house was quiet but not empty. A different kind of silence now. The kind you choose. Later that week, June asked if she could hang another crane. "It's not a memory," she said. "It's something he never got to say." Caleb nodded, helped her tie it with a red string. Watched it twist beside the others. Not a replacement. Not an answer. Just something true that had finally been said. Some wounds don't close, but they can soften, can shift from ache to weight, and even a weight, when shared, can become something you carry without sinking. The bird bridge didn't hold. It sagged after the second rain. The string loosened. The popsicle sticks softened and bowed. June stood in the yard, arms crossed, not angry, just quiet. Caleb walked out with 2 mugs of warm cider and said nothing. He looked at the bridge, then at the clouds rolling in. Might have held better if we used glue instead of hope. June half smiled. "I wanted it to float," she said. It did. For a while. She took the mug. They watched it fall together. Inside, Marla was moving furniture. Not out of the house, just away from the walls, letting light hit the floor in new angles, as if making space for something unnamed. She didn't talk about it. Caleb didn't ask. Some silences didn't hurt anymore. Some just meant we were still listening. At school, June had started writing short stories. Not about birds. About people who didn't win. Didn't lose. Just tried again. One was about a girl who built houses from sand that kept washing away, but who loved the feel of the water more than she hated the collapse. Her teacher asked if it was sad. June shrugged. "It's just how things are sometimes." That spring, Caleb replaced the porch screen. It had torn during a storm, and the wind kept pulling it loose. He fixed it on a Sunday morning, with the radio low and the dog asleep at his feet. He whistled as he worked. Not a song, just something to carry the quiet. Later that evening, June came to the porch with a box. Inside, her old drawings. The first crane. A note from Marla. A spoon she'd once said was her lucky soup spoon. She placed it all on his lap. "What's this for?" "It's your inheritance," she said. He laughed, but she was serious. "It's everything that made me feel safe." He looked into the box. Didn't speak for a long time. Then, "You forgot one thing." She tilted her head. "You," he said. She thought for a second, then climbed onto the step beside him, wrapped both arms around his middle. "I'm not leaving," she whispered. "I know." He whispered back, and they sat like that, as the sun leaned lower behind the trees, as the cranes danced in the wind, not in sorrow, but simply because the breeze was there and they had room. Some returns aren't loud. Some wars and not with flags, but with a girl leaning into your side. And a porch light you forgot to turn off. Because you don't need it anymore. You're home. Even if you never called it that before. Even if all it took was staying. There are stories that end with a goodbye. This isn't one of them. This is the kind that lingers in the doorway, quiet, steady, where no one leaves in a rush and the porch light stays on just a little longer. Caleb never needed to be called a father to be one. And June never needed perfect words to say she felt safe. Sometimes, healing doesn't arrive with fanfare. It comes with cocoa cooling on the step, with paper cranes swaying in the breeze, with a man who stays, even when the papers don't ask him to. And maybe that's the point, that the ones who change our lives the most are rarely the loudest. They just show up, day after day, until we believe it's okay to be seen again. If this story touched something quiet inside you, a memory, a person, a light that never went out, you're welcome to share it below. Not for views, not for noise, just to let someone else know. They're not alone in the dark, because somewhere, a porch light is still on, and someone's waiting, not to fix you, but to stay.